Yeah, so thank you, Milan. Thank you all to join this meeting. So there are a few points on the agenda. The first one was proposed by Sebastian about maintaining the different Fortran-lang project like STBlib or even FPM. So Sebastian, I know you open a few issues. Do you want to uh, take the lead of that, please?
Yes. Let's. Can you enable screen sharing for me?
Yeah, just a second. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Yes, we had this discussion regarding reviewers and maintainers for standard lib, because we reached a point where some of the pull requests took quite a while in the review process. And we found there was a lot of support for reviewing, and this actually solved the issue we had at standard lib in a short-term way. But now we have to look into finding a more long-term solution for our projects to ensure that people are not waiting weeks or maybe months for the pull request to get reviewed. One proposal was to document the process better on how reviewers can start. And another proposal was to have actual project maintainers which are responsible for coordinating the project. So not necessarily for reviewing all by themselves, but maybe coordinating the efforts to find reviewers and make sure that everybody is, so every pull request is recognized and get some people assigned to work on it. And yes, we did this draft here, and I think I also opened an issue at Standard Lib to get those reviewer guidelines in. So yeah, so far we haven't yet started putting in the wiki, but this would be like the next step. So this was the general situation, and one proposal was to just elect some maintainers for standard lib, maybe 2 or 3 persons, and also for FPM, we just make sure that always somebody is available and then can move some work to other contributors or just hop into a discussion. And also, this gives those people to the maintainers some lead on the project, so they can make decisions. So I would make a start here and would say I'm volunteering as a maintainer for FPM. So
What people think about this solution? I was a bit, yeah, not very positive about that, simply because, yeah, I'm quite involved in STDBlib, but yeah, the last few months I'm really busy and I don't have really a lot of time to put in STDBlib, so I'm afraid that if I'm maintainer, yeah, I could delay the standard lib because I'm not available enough for that. That's a bit. I have a mixed feeling.
I also have a similar concern that it puts a lot of pressure on the maintainers to kind of be on top of things, and especially with stdlib, there's so much activity that I find it really difficult to keep track of, and so and also I guess oh sorry, yeah. So my point, which was a little bit negative, is that I'm not convinced that the distribution of reviews is actually the kind of rate limiting factor in some of these projects. I think the rate limiting factor is finding reviewers who have the time to go through some of these really big pull requests and review them in high quality and engage with the process. So that's just my thoughts on the matter.
Lawrence and Jeremy, do you not think that if there were, say, 3 maintainers that are responsible not necessarily for reviewing, but prompting and encouraging others to review, so basically asking to review, it may not work always, but in some cases that may just be enough to motivate somebody to do a review.
Yeah, I think it's definitely it's beneficial, but and honestly, I'm not actually too sure exactly how different it is to what we have at the moment, because we kind of already have de facto maintainers particularly for FPM, it's myself and Sebastian. And I'm not too caught up on what happens with std-lib. So I guess I'm asking, are we just kind of discussing formalizing titles here? Is that what we're discussing?
I think for one, it's a bit formalizing the effort of people already active in those communities, and just giving them more space for what they're already doing. I mean, we certainly can't expect from a project maintainer to be available 24 hours a whole week. So this is completely unrealistic. We're still a volunteer project, but at least so it gives an expectation who to talk to if there's some problem and to call it. So we get a lot of new contributions at Standard Lib right now, and it's always good to have somebody who can help out and have those new contributors get familiar with the process of contributing to Standard Lib. There's a lot of things which is not good documented and which people have to learn while doing this pull request. And this is some work to do. And if there's nobody around, those pull requests just open, and then maybe there will be no. And it's difficult to see how the engagement should go.
Mm-hmm. The idea is to give newcomers clear points of contact when they want to make a new contribution, so that when they submit a pull request, they have somebody they can tag and say, hey, I need this reviewed. And you may not have the time to review it then, but at least you might know who you could assign it to. Whereas a newcomer would have no idea who else to ping. They might just open the pull request and it just floats there until somebody happens to get around to it. So basically the idea is to try and just not let pull requests just be thrown over the wall and then just float around for a while until somebody happens to decide that they want to review it. Giving a clear point of contact and somebody who's responsible for making sure that it gets reviewed avoids that just lull and things slipping through the cracks.
Yeah, I'm also positive about like formalizing these rules, simply because someone then feels responsible. I mean, if you call yourself maintainer and there's a pull request without even the slightest response after 2 weeks, you might just say, okay, look, this is my responsibility. At least I tell what comes next or explain why it takes so long.
And regarding time commitments, which has been a concern, these roles can rotate also, which I think solves Jeremy's problem. We all have times when we're unavailable and then times when we're more available. And these roles can rotate on a somewhat short term, few months, whatever it is.
I don't think that the problem is for the roles. The problem is to have enough time to do correct review of the code, and that takes time, especially with the big piece of pull request that we got the last time, and at least 4 or 5 pull requests that are really big to review, and yeah, and we need to find some people able to do that, and that's the biggest problem. I mean, we can assign maintainers. I'm not against that, for sure. Could be one for stability, for example, but even then, I would not find people to review this big piece of code easily, I think. Right.
What if you say, let's say there's a stale PR that needs reviewers, and you asked 5 people by email, or even through the GitHub issue, and it's possible that all of them will say no, but maybe 1 or 2 will say yes, and that otherwise, if they weren't asked, they would just, and that's how it is for me. Like, I think what Martin said, like, if there's without any kind of somewhat formal role, it's very easy to, we all kind of do. Well, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but when I don't have a formal role or responsibility, I just do things when I feel like it, when I enjoy it. But when I do have a formal role, then I have somewhat of a pressure and responsibility to others, and do some things even when I don't feel like it in the moment, but I think, oh, okay, it should be done, and that's my role. So at least for me, that somewhat works.
And the other thing, it doesn't have, I mean, I understand that, of course, the work is not done, but even if someone makes a new pull request and you simply say, look, I have 5 large pull requests on my shoulder, it might take a while. It's much more, it's much more welcoming than simply say nothing. So it takes you maybe 1 minute, and the people contributing to that feels okay and says, okay, it might take a while, instead of talking to a black hole.
Well, I kind of want to second Milan's point there that, I find it hard to find time to, go look through the pull request and see what's open and see what needs reviewed. But as soon as somebody tags me, I will make an effort to find the time to at least take a look at it. Right. And so it's that one little extra nudge to get people to say, hey, this needs help is, just should be enough to help alleviate the problem of stale pull requests.
Yeah, if you think it's helpful, I'm okay with that, no problem. So what would be the next step then? To formalize what Sebastian started on GitHub issue, or why so?
I would think, electing people to be, lead maintainers, and basically their role then is to kind of have a list of who's active, who can I ask to review these pull requests, so that, when one pops up and you don't have time to review it, you at least have a list of names of people to say, hey, can any of you guys review this? So it's more of a coordinator role than it is a reviewer and maintainer role.
I want to second Brett on this. One thing we noticed when opening this thread on this, because there's a lot of people that are interested in reviewing, but they don't know how. And as a maintainer who's familiar with the project and with GitHub in general, I think you're in a lot better position to have to get a potential reviewer up to speed on how to actually submit their comments, and also help new contributors to use this opportunity in the review to engage further with the community and make also their contribution better, so it's easier to review. And the main issue is always to have with the first review, and then somebody is familiar enough to start on their own, and to have with the first contribution of somebody, so they get familiar with the workflow. And usually those are the hardest, because if you start your first pull request, it's usually always too big, and if you do your first review, then you might not focus on the right things. But this is actually the most important part, where maybe maintainer who's familiar with the project can give some guidance to get more long-term contributors for our projects.
Can I ask a naive question? Because I've not even thought about attempting to review pull requests. And if I look at stdlib source, there's everything in here from, you know, what's an ASCII character to Gaussian quadrature. And it's probably daunting to figure out how would I identify myself as someone who might be interested in reviewing a certain aspect of things. Like I could probably do, you know, be involved in strings and bit sets and things like that, but anything that looks like real math or real algorithms or something like that probably belongs to in better hands. Would it be possible to either put in, you know, put some of these, you know, create kind of like subdirectories for libraries, you know, sublibraries of things that are somewhat related, that we can then tag at that level to say, oh yeah, you know, this is just generic programming stuff. Gary can take a look at it. Oh, this is, you know, this is physics. Somebody needs to look at it. Somebody else needs to look at it. Or linear algebra. Definitely somebody else needs to look at it. Or am I, you know, or am I just so out of the loop that everybody knows how this is supposed to work?
No, so there's actually been some recent improvement in that area, just leveraging the tagging features of GitHub's issues. There aren't that many tags right now, but you know, a pull request can be tagged mathematics, and then you know, between that and the name, that can sort of give someone an idea: am I going to be qualified to do this? Right. So the other thing that you sort of naturally select for, at least in the early days of StandardLib when I was most active, you know, the pull request would usually come out of an issue where you would first discuss, you know, is this a good feature to have? And usually the people who participated in that discussion were your go-to people to ping for a pull request. And that's how we made progress early on. And that, at least in, you know, early on, that seemed to work okay. Pull requests were still slow because they were big, but that basically functioned. And so I'm a little bit out of the loop. So I wonder what's different about the situation now. Is it just that there's just too much new stuff that people can't keep up with it? Is that it's too diverse, like Gary is bringing up? I mean, I'm not totally sure that we've really identified what the issue is. Besides, you know, we see the symptom is there's a pileup of pull requests, but what's the underlying issue?
I think there are a few. So one is that, so there are PRs that are very specialized. So let's say, you know, statistical distributions and sampling of random numbers from distributions. Generally, for example, for me, those are very difficult to review other than just on a general, okay, it compiles, it runs, the numbers look reasonable, but I'm not sure about whether it's doing what it's supposed to do. I can check the documentation that it's easy to read and understandable. But yeah, I guess higher expertise algorithms do require people who specialize in those areas to review. Then yes, we did have, I'd say many, maybe a dozen or more peer reviews that were just kind of large pull requests that weren't much discussed in an issue. So they didn't go through a gradual discussion process. And we had, for a while, we've been having a workflow, like a 5-step process, which we've been encouraging people to adhere to, but I don't think it sticks. We haven't really been following that. Perhaps one solution would be part of the solution would be to be more stringent about following that workflow. So then we spend more time in the issues. Now, one caveat with that is PRs are nice, is that sometimes to understand something, it's easier to see it in the flesh, like the implementation, rather than just kind of discussing the idea. So there's probably some balance between the two that will work. Yeah, so high expertise pull requests, large pull requests. And yeah, I think also overall high enthusiasm to contribute and not much energy and time and people to review what's being submitted, which is maybe a good problem to have. We are getting a lot of submissions.
And I noticed that, I mean, it looks like we have, 24 some tags for the issues, but I don't believe we can tag can we tag the pull requests themselves with those flags?
Mhm. Yeah, the
didn't
same
know how
labels
to do
apply to the same labels apply to both issues and pull requests.
Okay, because I think I only saw one pull request that had something on it that said something besides waiting for the OP and reviewers needed.
Yeah, so maybe that's like a good case to be made for having like a couple people who can sort of be, maintainer types, is to actually have someone who actually goes through and puts tags on issues, because that's something that I think a lot of, especially new contributors, will skip over doing. Issues and pull requests. I mean, I certainly didn't put any tags on any of the pull requests I used to submit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can do about half a job of that.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes. I will try to push them in the discourse later. I think that we can continue this discussion in the GitHub issue. If there is no more comments, there are some IDs too, so it would be nice to concretize them at some point. If there are no other comment for that, we can maybe move to the second point. Do you agree? If yes, it's about Fortran-Con 2021. So I think that it was discussed to do a presentation for FPM and also for STBlib. For FPM, I think it's Nathaniel who proposed to be the speaker, right? For STBlib, sorry, and for FPM, I'm not sure. So who does want to take the lead?
I believe Sebastian.
Mhm. Yeah, I believe Sebastian volunteered to be the presenter for FPM.
And do we have also a general presentation for the Fortran-lang project, as Milan did last year? Or
Yeah, maybe I can shed some light on this. As you might have seen, there's an update in the schedule of Fortran Con,
okay,
where we now have this mini symposium for Fortran languages starting at 5 p.m. and going for 1 hour and 45 minutes. And we are free to organize this session with our talks. So I started 2 discussions, one in FPM and one in Standard Lib, to just organize speakers. And there we found speakers for both projects, and you might have seen this thread here. And our plan to fill this session is that we we will have a talk by Lawrence about the state of Fortran, which might either lead this symposium or be in the general track. And we will have 3 talks for our core projects, which is standard lib, FPM, and Fortran. And then we will have an additional session for all our students which participate in the Google Summer of Code. And each of them will give a very brief lightning talk, about 5 minutes, about what they did in their summer. And then we would be able to fill this session with quite well. So this was the initial plan. And I think for the length of the core talks, it means we will arrive at 50 minutes each, including discussion. So 12 minutes plus maybe 12 minutes talk, 3 minutes discussion. If we, so this was an initial plan. So, but maybe you have also ideas how we can structure this.
I guess for Fortran, Andre will be the speaker, right?
Yeah, I guess so. And in the symposium, if we start from Lauren's general talk about state of Fortran, then have projects presented each, and then again a more detailed insight into some work by giving the students, we will cover pretty much everything which has been going on in Fortran-lang for the last year.
Sounds like a good plan. Sounds like you got most of it fleshed out.
Yeah, this all sounds good to me. Somehow I got confused. I thought we had only hour and 15, but it looks like it's hour and 45.
Yes, also
which improves things.
Yeah, and so we had an additional 30 minutes now.
Mm-hmm.
And
great.
This works pretty well for everything we planned so far. Yeah, so this is the current state. I think we have speakers for all the core projects. I think we got a response from all students now. Yes, we have. So then we can start working on the talks at Fortran-lang talks repository. And maybe also or get the abstracts maybe by the end of the week, so we can submit them and give them to the organizers in time, so they can put them online. So
we want to have is the idea that the summer students will give all their lightning talks in succession, or would it be like you give your FPM talk and then the FPM students give lightning talks, and then I speak about StandLib and the 2 students speak about how their lightning talks? Do we even care about these details yet?
I don't think we know yet.
I think we can still shuffle inside our session.
Okay.
This might also be an option, because then we can use one. We have always one topic together and discuss everything at once, and then we don't have to jump between topics. Maybe this is a better option, but
yeah, I like the idea of having one topic.
Yeah, I like it too.
All right.
So
this is everything I had regarding this organization.
When should the abstracts be submitted?
July 31, right?
Okay. So yeah, we have still time. Thank you. Any other comments on this topic?
Just a quick question. Are we asking the students to submit the abstracts themselves because they're going to be presenting, or are we going to do that on their behalf?
My plan was to collect abstracts for all talks, so we can give them to the organizers together, so they can put them up on the web page. But we will probably not submit them for the regular master. We have to discuss these details with the organizers, and let's see. So that's why it would be nice to have them before the official deadline, so we can sort this out.
I think we should probably encourage the students to at least have a hand in writing the abstract for their lightning talk, but it may be better to put the responsibility on the mentor to make sure that an abstract gets put together.
Yeah, I started working on a rough abstract just because I thought, because we hadn't pitched this to the students at the beginning of their project, it might be a little bit unfair to suddenly throw it into the mix halfway through. So I'm happy to help the FPM student Jakob with it and give him, it's up to him if he wants to, I'll just let him do whatever he wants with it.
Yeah. Great. Any other comments? No. Good then, if it's clear for everyone. Then I propose that we move to the next topic, which is about the Fortran preprocessor FIP, and it was proposed by Andre. Is Andre already there?
I don't think so. Maybe Balin can talk about rewriting FIP.
I was actually curious what Andre would like to say about that. So my point is, of course, it can be rewritten in Fortran, no question about that. But the question is, do we have the resources for that, the human resources? I mean, as for FIPP, I'm using Python's capability to parse expressions, especially nested lists and dictionaries and nested dictionaries, lists in dictionaries, whatever, quite a lot. And actually, we are also in the standard lib, we are using some of those capabilities already, right? If you are looping over, let's say, pair of tuples, a list containing pair tuples. And of course, it can be all implemented in Fortran. But if you look, for example, Coco was mentioned, I looked at that. Coco has a super simple grammar, and still we are talking about more than 1,000 lines of code. And also, if you look, for example, at new LLVM Fortran front-end, which has also a built-in macro processor, again, with a very limited grammar, much more limited what we are already using in FIPP. We are again talking about several thousand lines of code. Okay, that's C++, but still, it can build up on the capabilities, parsing capabilities, which are already there anyway, because it's a compiler. And basically, if you plan to write it in Fortran, then basically at some point you have to build again a parser, which builds a kind of abstract syntax tree or whatever format, and then we are processing that. So I think it's possible, but I think the community should ask the question itself, whether it's realistic to assume that we have enough human resources for that.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of the way things were is there were like two technical advantages to using Fortran, which were that you no longer have to rely on a Python interpreter, which is, in my opinion, not that big of a technical positive, because everyone's going to have a Python interpreter on hand for the foreseeable future. The other one being that if you write it in Fortran, you have access to things like ISO Fortran M, so you know the real kinds, the logical kinds, and all that. You don't have to hack that in yourself with like a FIPP include file. But even then, that's not, in my opinion, a terribly big enough advantage to be worth the big effort it'll take to basically implement sort of a mini compiler to do pre-processing. That's sort of my take on it. So I was hoping Andre would be here too, so he could push back on that idea. But it.
Yeah, I kind of got the feeling that there aren't really very many technical advantages to writing the preprocessor in Fortran, but the social advantage being that anybody who wants to use it might also then be able to be a contributor because they're writing Fortran, they know how to write Fortran, which was basically the approach that we took for FPM, was like, this is a really powerful tool. Yeah, maybe Fortran's not the best language for this job, but all of our users are going to be able to be contributors now. So I don't know. We kind of have to weigh the technical versus the social benefits of that. And in this case, I kind of lean towards the technical benefits of using something like Python outweigh the social benefits, because it's not that big and complex of a tool when you use something as powerful as Python.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, the other thing that I think was raised is incorporating PyPP in like FPM build, like how to tell FPM how if somebody needs PyPP to build their FPM project, how do they wrangle that? Do they ship PyPP with their project, or there were questions like this. And the way I understood the issue, it seemed like you could probably get around this via compiler flags, right? So most compilers let you select and execute, let you instruct the compiler to use a particular executable to do the pre-processing, right? And it expects that executable to conform to certain semantics, like maybe it needs to take the program in on standard input and put the processed source on standard output. And if that's all we need to do, and if that seems like it'd be a very minor change to make to PyPP if it needs it at all, right? It seems like that's a much simpler way to go, is just to give just have FPM be aware of that compiler flag and make sure that PyPP conforms to the semantics that compilers typically expect for that.
So at the moment, one of the current plan that I have in my head, and we've got an issue on our GitHub in FPM, is that FPM will need to be able to invoke will need to be able to invoke the preprocessor itself in order, because it does a source scanning phase where it reads all the module users. And so we had an issue opened by a potential user of this capability who said, if you're going to implement this, it's really important to our use case that the pre-processing happens before you start scanning sources, so that the dependencies take that into account.
Yeah, so I think it would be very, very important. So I think it's much easier to implement in FPM, to use any kind of preprocessor, customized preprocessor, than to write a preprocessor with a grammar which covers the current needs on standard lib. And also we should keep in mind that I mean, FIPP is horrible, right? It's just a temporary hack to basically implement things which are at the moment missing. And I really hope that it can vanish as soon as possible, because the language standards offers most, especially the loops. I mean, if you think about it, it's a nightmare. We are generating, I don't know how many 100 combinations for certain functions just because generics are missing. And I think what remains at the very, very end, if all that is covered by the standard, is maybe conditional compilation, just to some easy case, MPI, non-MPI in the same code, whatever. So again, this is also, I think, one reason not to invest too much effort in replacing it, but basically just integrating it as it is and hope that we can dispose that in a few years' time completely.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments on this topic? I mean, yeah, unfortunately, Andre is not there. So maybe we can come back later on the next call on that if needed. Yeah, there are no other agenda. There are no other point on the agenda. There's any other business that you'd like to discuss now? We still have a few minutes. I see Milan saying no. Others? If not, I propose to close the meeting, and then we'll meet again in 1 month, hopefully. Is it okay, or is it holidays for most of people?
I will be gone first 3 weeks of August.
Okay. Yeah, I will send a doodle, then see when it is best possible. Good. So thank you all, and bye then.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.
Everyone.
All right, cheers.
Thank you all. Bye.